with interview. Again, I'm Deborah Sheffield. Whether you anticipate going on or you with that on the spot, study yourself. Have these examples ready to go in your mind ahead of time. Even journal and think about where you've been. Think about your activities, your leadership that you've been involved in, your volunteer work. Think about everything that could potentially be asked. Have examples set in your mind. That way, when they ask you about them, you're right there ready to retrieve those because you've studied them in advance. Make several copies of your resume. Of course, they're going to have copies of your resume, but it's polite to bring some just in case, because sometimes last minute, if they're unprepared for the interview, they may grab a couple people to sit in on the interview, though they might not have already made copies for those people. So you should bring several copies in advance to show that you're well prepared. Also a copy of the job position itself, so you can kind of go back and refer to it. A lot of times you don't send references when you send a resume and a cover letter, so make sure that you're prepared with a reference sheet typed up, and it should have at least 3 references on it, depending on how many they ask for in the interview. You should have, of course, someone that you've worked with would be the best kind of reference. Former supervisor, could be a current coworker, could be professor, but have it typed up, have the information about them, how you know them, their email address, their phone number, and their address. Write out a list of questions that you're going to ask at the end of an interview. When they say, do you have any questions for us, which they definitely will say at the end, you should absolutely 100% have questions for the interviewer. We're going to talk about that later, what kind of questions to ask. Map out your route. So perhaps you're used to just traveling just a few miles. Perhaps you're not used to traveling to an interview at the 9 o'clock hour in New York City, for example. Take into account traffic, road closures, public transportation times, potential of delays. These are times where you might not have traveled before, or places you might not have traveled to. That in and of itself can make you even more anxious for the interview, and it could affect you when you get there. Make sure you map out your route. Have some hygiene items in your car or maybe in your purse, tissues, hand wipes, gum to make your breath fresh, deodorant, etc. Make sure you wash your hands before the actual interview itself. And of course, dress for success, which we're going to talk about in a second. Polish your shoes, have your suit dry cleaned. You should be always wearing a suit for an interview. Make sure it's dry cleaned and looks good, all wrinkles out and everything like that. Some interviews would require a portfolio. Make sure that's all ready and neat. Lay it all out beforehand, so when you get to the interview, you're just focused on questions and things like that, but you don't have to worry about those things. Do all those things in advance. And a hint, you actually should even dress up for a phone or Skype interview. Skype goes without saying because it's going to be videotaped, but I've had phone interviews in the past, and I've dressed in a suit for a phone interview because something about the feeling of you dressing in a suit automatically makes you more professional and to speak in a more professional way. So types of interviews may vary. So you may have already gone on an interview at a job fair. William Patterson has job fairs throughout the year. Those job fair interviews, sometimes they could be the hiring interview, or sometimes they're a screening interview to get you to actually be brought in to the organization. In any case, treat it like it is the last interview. So always be professional. The great thing about a job fair, it's a guarantee. It's a guaranteed first interview. You haven't had to go through the resume and selection stage. You're right there making a first impression. Job fairs are a wonderful way to get a job. You could have a phone interview, and phone interviews could seem a little bit nerve-wracking because you can't see the person. There's not a lot of opportunity for certain types of nonverbal communication, but the advantage to a phone interview is that you can have a lot of notes in front of you. So like I said, you should be studying yourself and thinking of giving some examples. If you had some note cards in front of you in a phone interview with some examples written out, that'll really help you. You can't have that in an in-person interview, but here's an opportunity in a phone interview for you to have that in front of you, and that might improve your interview skills in that situation. A lot of times as a recent college graduate, you might have a group interview, and in a group interview, they're going to interview you alongside several other people. You need to be really careful in a group interview setting in terms of 2 things. One, you need to not be too dominant, and so you don't want to dominate the discussion because that's going to say something, speak a lot about you. Also, you don't want to be under assertive either and not really, stand up for yourself, talk about yourself, and let other people talk over you. So you kind of want to get that middle ground going and to show you're a team player, okay? Formal interviews are going to be structured. They're going to probably have questions written out in advance. There might be a search committee asking you questions, and there might be a lot of different questions. Many of you have probably, for your part-time jobs, been on informal interviews, or if you had a connection in a job, they just they know they're hiring you. It might be informal. They might ask you a couple questions. They might just want to see you in person before they hire you. But expect that if you're going out for a job that's going to be more of your career kind of a job, it might be a formal interview, a group interview, a phone or Skype interview, or a job fair. Don't expect that it'll be an informal interview. And something about an informal interview, just because the interviewer is acting informally doesn't mean that you should also. Okay, if you remember nothing else about this webinar, I want you to know this. Nonverbal communication is really, truly the ultimate deciding factor in whether an employer is going to hire you. An employer is going to be much more forgiving of an imperfect verbal response than they are a flawed nonverbal communication. So actions truly do speak much louder than words. This is true also in your own life. Think about when you meet friends, when you're looking for a potential date. A lot of times you're going to be reading the nonverbal communication. So it's not exactly what you say, and a lot of people get caught up in what exactly their response should be to all the questions. It's much more how you say it and how you present yourself. So please remember that. So up to 93% of an employer's decision to hire you takes place in the first 30 seconds. That's before you even talk. So what could they possibly determine in those first 30 seconds? First, they'll judge you a lot on your handshake. That's why I chose to put that picture there, because the handshake is very important. A handshake says a lot about you. It says if you're confident, if you're not confident, if you're overconfident. It says a lot about you. So make sure that you have a nice firm handshake and that you look the interviewer in the eye. Your appearance, dressing the part for the interview is going to be really important. We're actually going to watch a whole video about dressing for success in a moment. Your body language, make sure that your legs are not crossed, your arms are not crossed. Make sure that you have an open body language. Again, approachability. Make sure that you're providing eye contact, and if there's a number of people interviewing you, that you divide that eye contact among the different people. Even if one person asks you a question, you can begin by answering to that person, but make sure that you provide eye contact to the rest of the group who are interviewing you. That's really important. Make sure you divide it equally, that you're not giving eye contact to just one person. That can make them really uncomfortable, or that you're neglecting another person. That can make them wonder about what you think and biases and things like that. Paralanguage. So I know this is about nonverbal communication, and again, I teach communication classes. Paralanguage actually is considered nonverbal communication because it doesn't have to do with words. Volume, pitch, tone, hesitations, all those things are part of paralanguage. Make sure that you're speaking loud enough, but you're not screaming to them, that your pitch is normal, that you have a good tone of voice, a welcoming tone of voice, and try to be careful about hesitations. Of course, all these things can't be perfect, but with practice, you should aim to get these things as best as you can. Gestures. Having no gestures shows that you're a little closed off. Over-gesturing may make you appear a little bit desperate for the job, so you want to make sure that you have appropriate gestures. If you're giving an example of something that you did 3 times, you might want to hold up your fingers, 1, 2, 3. Appropriate gestures are really positive to help accentuate what you're talking about in your verbal communication. Body odor. There's a lot of people who are really sensitive to perfumes and colognes. It's best to either not have them or to keep them at a minimum. Of course, wear deodorant. Distracting nervous habits. So everybody has a nervous habit. I will share mine. Mine is over blinking. When I get nervous, I tend to blink a lot. So the way I've handled that is when I get prepared for an interview, I look at myself in the mirror, I try to watch for my eyes and make sure that I'm not over blinking. A lot of females have problems with playing with their hair. Simple, just tie your hair back. Make sure you have a nice bun going or something like that. Sometimes people tend to tap their feet when they're nervous. Just be aware of that. Maybe put your hands on your leg a little bit, but don't make that neglect you gesturing. Some people speak too fast during an interview or when they're nervous. So that, again, with a career counselor, you can learn to slow down and they'll give you honest feedback about that. Overall, if you do all these things, you're going to increase your approachability. And approachability is what makes you very likable. Okay, so I mentioned that we're going to watch a video on Dress for Success. So here's a little short video. Bear with me here. We got it? Oh. Yeah, it went away. Hold on 1 second. It was right over here. Oh. Okay, hold on one second. We'll get back to it. My apologies. I had it up here. We're going to get to it. Here we go. Yeah. Macs and PCs, you know.
Horrible. Okay, go back into.
Where is it? Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, there we go. I had this up before. Oh, we're not. We don't have any volume. The volume went away. Telling you guys, I tested this beforehand. Okay, we're gonna skip the dress for success, but let me give you tips about it. Sorry, everybody. I don't know. The volume appears up, as you can all see, but what are we gonna do? Okay.
Well, you know what we'll do?
So let me
give you this link.
We'll give you the link.
We'll send it. You can watch it when you get your email.
My apologies. We haven't. It looks like we haven't lost anyone, so that's good.
Yes.
But let me tell you about Dress for Success. So envision what the video might have included. So for any interview, no matter what it is, even if you think that this is a job where people tend to dress less formally, a man and a woman always should wear a suit. Man should wear a suit that is a dark color with a contrasting color shirt underneath it and a tie. If you wear the same color as the suit, that looks more like a wedding kind of attire. You want a contrasting color with a tie without any kind of loud prints on it. Keep it err on the side of conservative always. So your shoes should be polished and keep everything neat. If you have any piercings or anything like that, make sure to hide that. For women, also a suit. It could be a skirt suit or a pantsuit, but make sure the skirt suit is at least to your knee, not several inches above your knee, because of course that gives a wrong impression. A woman obviously should wear a contrasting color shirt as well. Underneath, make sure it's not too low cut. Jewelry should be kept very small. Makeup should be daytime makeup, and everything really should err on the side of conservative for both men and women. Hose isn't necessarily something that you have to have these days. I've been told that hose is on its way out now. Hosiery.
I just want to say, someone said that it was muted on the YouTube.
It was muted on the YouTube.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to try it again, or if you.
All right, I'll go back to it.
Okay.
Thank you for whoever said that. I appreciate it. That's why I do communication, not technology lessons. I don't do computer webinars. So women should wear pumps. And they shouldn't be stilettos with ladies. They should be 2 or 3 inch heels. So whatever you have, make sure you have the proper size heel. And also you want to be able to walk in them, of course. So also the heels should be closed toe. So there's some information about dressing. So let's see if we can get this again. Should be down here.
Get our tech person.
Wait. Oh, not under downloads. I don't have a Mac, so come on. Oh, okay. Okay, we'll go to, oh, here we go. It's already up. Oh, it is. That's strange because it was unmuted. We tested it before.
Got promoted. That tended to dress better. People don't realize how important dressing is. I think we tend to think, oh, it's dumb. It's really not that important. Who cares? Well, it's kind of like a resume. With clothing, it's the very first impression someone will get of you before you even have a chance to open your mouth.
For an insider's take on the right outfits for your profession, we spoke to a fashion representative at Dairy's flagship store in New York City.
For men dressing in the corporate setting, I think a suit is always the best option. We have a dark navy suit. A dark suit's great just because it's really versatile and you'll always be able to wear it, whether it's for an interview, a board meeting, or any work-appropriate occasion. For a man to dress in a less corporate setting, I think separates are a great way to go. For example, here we have a navy cardigan with a button-down and a tie. And you can really wear it without the tie if you want to for a less corporate look. Wearing the khaki pant with any sort of button down is a great option for casual dressing at the office. It's put together, but it's still relaxed. If you're questioning something that you want to wear and you're not sure if it's right, it probably isn't. If it's too shiny, if it's too tight, if it's too big, I probably just wouldn't recommend wearing it. For women dressing in a corporate setting, I would recommend a suit. Here we have a great fitted blazer, a button-down shirt, and a trouser pant. It's really put together, it's easy, and it looks really professional at the same time. But another option, if you don't want to wear a suit, is separates. Something like a great cardigan like this, with a button-down shirt and a pencil skirt, is still professional, but a little bit more relaxed and great for the office. Another casual option at the office is a pair of khaki pants. We have these straight leg pants that are great with a little tie-dye top like this for a little novelty and a little fashion, but still work appropriate. Two other great casual options are shift dresses. What's great about shift dresses is that you can wear them underneath the blazer to work for an interview, or you can wear them just as they are. This one is great with a white button down underneath it, or this one's great too just alone. Some fashion faux pas for women to look out for in the workplace are really anything that's too much of anything, whether it's too short, too tight, too revealing, too low cut. You should really stay away from wearing anything like that.
I definitely think one should be thinking about wearing your best for an interview. I go by the rule, you're better off to tend to be a little bit more conservative in an interview than to go the other way around, unless you know specifically that they're looking at you for your creativity. Say you were going to interview in an advertising agency that's hiring you to be a creative person. There, you may decide to be a little bit more outlandish because that's what they're hiring you to do. The important part here is to be appropriate for the setting you're in.
Okay, so one more thing I want to say about that is they always say dress to the role that you aspire to be in one day, not for the role you're interviewing for. So that's a good last bit of advice about dressing for success. So I'm going to pause here because apparently we have some questions already.
We do. I just wanted to say one person said they love theory, but it's kind of expensive.
I understand. I've never actually stepped foot in that store, so there's a lot of places you can go. I always highly recommend Macy's, even Target. There's really good sales there. Macy's always has coupons. Trust me, I don't shop at those stores either. I work in higher education.
Okay, we just have like two questions that I think people thought of as you were doing your other stuff.
Right.
But one person went on an interview. It was for a teaching job.
Okay.
And was asked one question, was only asked one question.
Wow.
Why do you want this job? And then they asked her, do you have any questions for us? And she had prepared questions.
Okay.
So she said with her asking questions, this interview lasted for 1 hour. How long should it have lasted? And how many questions should she have asked? Like, is that too long, the hour?
It lasted an hour with her
asking them questions.
It depends on it depends, and I don't know if I could ask her right now, but if it was an hour because they were giving such extended answers or because you had that many questions, I would kind of mirror what they have done because just to respect their time, they might have another person after you. So if they had priority and brevity in an interview, then you probably should do that as well. If someone's asking you one question in an interview, which by the way I've never heard of before, that sounds like really high pressure. I probably would have only asked maybe 1 to 3 questions back to them because obviously they place some sort of importance on it being brief. And for that one question, I probably would have included something about your philosophy of education and perhaps some examples of lesson plans. So that's how I probably would have gone about it in a teaching interview. Okay. Is there another question?
One more question. This other person, I'm not sure if this is the same person.
Okay.
They asked for their resume and their certification, which they have.
Okay.
And they didn't ask for anything from a portfolio or any references. Now this person is asking, should they call or email and say, oh, by the way, here are my references? They don't want to seem too pushy.
At this point, you probably don't need to do that, but in future interviews, I would just go ahead and bring the portfolio with you, whether they ask for it or not, and have a list of references typed up in the portfolio. Have it all ready to go. And you could even say, even if they don't ask for it, say, I have my portfolio with me. Would you like to see some examples of my work? And typically they'll say, sure, and make some copies perhaps of lesson plans, and they probably would be happy to look at that. If they say, no, we don't have time, well, at least you were prepared with that, and that can never be a negative thing. To be really prepared is never negative.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to go through actual questions. And I know that for most of you attending this webinar, you probably came into it thinking, well, how do I answer this question? How do I answer that question? I'm going to go through this, but always keep in mind that this isn't the 100% last word on how to answer questions, because there's of course variations depending on who you are, but also that nonverbal communication again is going to carry a lot more weight than the actual answers to the questions. So make sure you have your nonverbal communication done very well and your approachability. Okay, so tell us about yourself. Always, this is the first question in an interview. I've pretty much not been on an interview where this was not the first question, no matter what kind of setting it was in. So tell us about yourself sounds really broad and wide open, but here are some keys to, some tips actually to answering this. First, keep your answer no more than about 2 minutes long. Again, for that one person, if that was the only question in the whole interview, perhaps they could have gone on a little longer. But if it looks like there's going to be more questions, which typically there are, keep the answer to no more than 2 minutes. So in those 2 minutes, here's some things that you could do to help stand out among all the other applicants. You can use buzzwords from the job description. So if the job description calls for a team player, someone who wants to travel a lot, a good communicator, perhaps a tech guru, make sure you use some of those buzzwords in there, even if they use a certain type of technology and you've done it before and you're really adept at it. Use the buzzwords from the job description. Those job descriptions aren't just a bunch of words thrown together at the last minute. They're really well thought out. They wrote those words in the description because they cared a lot about the applicant having those qualities. So if you can use those buzzwords, again, that would be great. Make sure you highlight your accomplishments from your resume. So you've already sent your resume, you know it's good enough to get the interview. Don't assume that they've all read your resume forwards and backwards. Basically, there was probably one person, maybe two people looking at the resumes and they say like, okay, this person meets the minimum qualifications. Sometimes when you get to the interview, some people have never even seen your resume till they get there. Remember, they're all busy at work and they were pulled into this interview. So you can actually be repetitive of your resume and highlight some of your accomplishments as if you were taking a highlighter and talking about it, but of course you can provide more detail. Definitely talk about work, education, any relevant skills you may have, or relevant experience. What you should never talk about is personal information, such as family, religion, politics, etc. Basically, anything you wouldn't also talk about on a first date. Okay, so they're going to probably ask you what are your strengths, and conversely, what areas do you need to improve on? So everyone fears the what areas do you need to improve on question. So let's start with what are your strengths then. Okay, what are your strengths? So make sure that whatever you say, and this is always an easy answer, keep them related to the job. But if you're sitting here and just listing some adjectives, for example, you're going for a teaching job, and you say, well, I'm very creative and I'm a people person and I just love children. Well, that's wonderful, but we're hoping that everybody who's applying for a teaching job feels that way. If you can use examples, that would be even better. So if you say, everybody tells me I'm really creative, okay, well, tell me about that. Make sure you use an example. Talk about a lesson plan that you used a lot of creativity for. What areas do you need to improve on? In this case, this should be a shorter answer. Keep it short, keep it simple. Definitely don't use any deal breaker weaknesses. If you have some big flaw in your personality that has gotten you in trouble in a job, even fired in a job, don't bring it up. So if you have trouble going to work or something like that, if you have a temper problem, don't bring up any of these things. Bring up the lighter weaknesses and make sure that you plan on telling them how you're going to improve on the weakness. So for example, if you have a little deficiency in knowing some of the newer technologies, say, well, sometimes I get a little nervous about technology, and of course, you probably realize I'm using this example because we couldn't get the YouTube video to work. So this, maybe I'm talking about myself here, but you can talk about how in the future you plan on improving on this weakness. Maybe you have a weakness with multitasking because you get so focused on one area and you want to do something so well, you have trouble focusing on the other areas. Talk about how you're going to improve on that skill. Some people are really bad at delegating and they want to do everything themselves. They feel like they have to have control over everything. Talk about how you're planning on letting go and getting to know your team members and delegating. Okay, another question. What do you know about our company and this position? Believe it or not, this question might be the most important question in the interview, because if you don't know anything about this company or this position and you're sitting back expecting them, all passively, and expecting them to tell you about the company and the position, that's a huge red flag. You're definitely not going to get that job. You must, like I said earlier, do your research ahead of time. Not knowing anything about the job, again, is a big red flag and could cost you the job. So learn about their mission statement. Companies put a lot of effort into their mission statement. If it's a public company, stock reports, earnings, their website, their social networking sites, learn about potential new products and services. If you have a connection there who's told you about the company, as long as it's positive, you can kind of name drop that connection, say, well, so-and-so works here, and they told me how wonderful it is to work for this company because of this reason, as long as it's positive. Okay, next. Tell me about your previous work experience. Seems pretty innocent, but the fear is always, well, what if I don't feel like I don't have any relevant work experience? Try to, if you can, highlight the experiences that relate to the job that you were seeking. But if you really feel you have not had any relevant experience, you probably have more than you think. Think in terms of transferable skills. So if you're going for a high-stress public relations job, for example, and the only work that you've had is being a waitress or a waiter in a restaurant, or the proper term is probably server in a restaurant, well, you've multitasked. You've had customer service and you have multitasked. Try to emphasize the transferable skills that are relevant to the job. Remember, don't obsess over the answers to these questions. It's the nonverbal communication that's more important. Never ever talk negatively about your prior work. That seems to go without saying, but I have been in mock interviews with students where I ask them about this and they've talked negatively about their former employers or why it wasn't a good fit. You don't need to do that. I know that's forefront in your mind because that's why you're looking for a new job or any job at all. Make sure you never ever do that because they know that if you talk negatively about the old experience, they're going to feel like you're going to do that to them as well. So they'll probably ask you, why do you want this position? And perhaps, why did you choose this for a career? So you want to always show that you have good character when you talk about this. 1 second. Oh, did I skip one? I had one more in here. I feel like I skipped one. Okay. Always show that you have good character and that you have a sincere love for what you've gone into and the responsibilities of the work, not the perks involved. So you're interviewing for a travel company, for example, and you know that you're going to get 50% off tropical vacations, for example. Don't say that. Don't say, I went into this because I know I'm going to get some really cheap vacations out of this deal. Talk about, show you have good character, show you really like the responsibilities of the job, and demonstrate how you are a good fit for the position, of course, using examples. One thing you should never do when they ask you why you want a position, don't say, I want this position because I heard I get 4 weeks off, or I get these kinds of benefits and retirement benefits and this kind of salary and you guys pay a lot more than someone else, or this was not really my first choice, or something like that. Positive, positive, positive. The key is to show how you're going to help them. So people interviewing you are probably trying to figure out how you're a good fit to work with them, how you're going to make their lives easier by working with them. So you're not going to make their life easier by you collecting this salary, these benefits, this amount of time off. Of course, these things are important to you, but they don't care about that. They care about how you're going to fit in with them and how you're going to help alleviate some of their workload, basically. So you want to demonstrate that. Okay, so here's a behavioral question, and you should always anticipate that this is going to go on. These are always the questions that make people nervous because they're hard to have control over. But there's some level of control that you can have in expectations about these questions being asked. So one is something like this. Tell us about a time in which you worked in a team. How did you handle conflict? So again, a behavioral question, expect many like these. This question is because they want to envision what you're going to be like in the job itself. So they want to have a visual of how you are in the workplace. So remember I said to journal, study yourself, journal about your past experiences. Think about group projects you've been in, clubs and organizations, prior job experiences, and you've already prepared these in advance. If you have a phone interview, you might even have some of these written on note cards. If not, you're storing these because you've studied these in advance. Consider this interview kind of like your final exam on yourself. So prepare these by reflecting on your past experiences. It is okay to take and expected to take time to think it over. A pause to you in an interview is going to seem a lot longer than a pause to them. They want you to have a thoughtful answer. It's completely okay to sit back for a minute and to think. And if you're nervous about that pause, again, it's going to seem a lot longer to you than it does to them, but never try to use fillers, nervous fillers, like, hey, that's a good question, let me think about this, or something like that. Just pause. Just a pause is always healthy. Silence is completely okay in an interview. When you answer any of these questions, answer it thoroughly and honestly, and also keep it positive. And another way to prepare for questions like this is to study the job posting. Remember, you're going to study yourself, and I also want you to study the job posting. In the job posting, if they say it's important to them to have someone that's going to have experience working in a team, that enjoys working in a team, well, they care a lot about that. They've really thought about this job posting. So expect that they probably will ask for an example of a time in which you worked in a team, or whatever it may be, in a leadership position, multitasking, all those things, all those skills related to the job. Okay, another scary question. Why did you leave your previous job? So hopefully you've left all your jobs on good terms, but the reality is a lot of people don't leave jobs on good terms for various reasons. This is the answer that should be short, especially if you left for a negative reason. Keep the answer short. Look forward, not backwards. So you can have a really quick answer and then talk more about the future than the past if it was something negative. I know someone's going to ask me, but I was laid off from my job. Should I mention it? Someone always asks me that. Yes, you can mention it. Layoffs are unfortunately common and understood nowadays. Cutbacks in companies for budgetary reasons are understandable. It doesn't necessarily reflect poorly on your job performance. It's okay to say that you were laid off from a job, that they had cutbacks or something like that. Word it nicer. If you quit, though, or left a job on bad terms, simply say something very short, like it was not a good fit for me, or I was seeking a position that would be closer to my aspirations. So more, that's looking forward. I was seeking more of a position that would be more challenging for me, closer to what I wanted to do. Okay? Hopefully they won't dig more about that, but try to keep, even if they dig, try to keep it really short, and of course, always try to keep it positive. Again, never ever say anything negative. Big problem if you say anything negative. Okay. Are you willing to work evenings and overtime? Are you willing to relocate? This may be a really easy question for some of you to answer, and for some of you it may be harder. Those who are willing to work evenings and overtime and relocate and all that fun stuff, that's easy. You're just going to say yes. So you can, if you're unsure about this, if this seems like a surprise to you, you can ask what exactly they mean. I mean, it doesn't, you don't have to ask to the minute, but say in general, what do you mean by overtime, weekends, and all that? If you say yes, they'll be pleased. Obviously, they have importance in that. But if you say no, you're probably not going to get the job. If travel is expected, if relocation is expected, evenings and overtime is expected, you're probably not going to get the job. But if you're not willing to do it, it's probably not the job you wanted anyway. So it's probably mutually not a good fit for either of you. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Another very common question that they may ask you. Some people fear this question because they know in the back of their mind this is a stepping stone. They're planning on going somewhere else. They might feel like they're settling for this job. Okay, but if it's true that you really wanted to work for the company, the best answer is that you're going to see yourself growing as a professional in the company you're interviewing for. You don't have to say, I want to be your boss one day or something pompous like that, of course. Sounds really pompous. But you can say, I would love to see where this goes, and hopefully I'd like to gain a promotion at some point if I do a good job, if you feel I did a great job, or I'd like to see what opportunities are in this company. But I know, in all honesty, you might see yourself somewhere else. So we don't want you to lie in an interview. I would never tell you to lie. If you see yourself somewhere else, try to be open-minded. And this should be very vague. Say you're looking forward to learning what options are available for you to grow professionally. Because you never know. Perhaps you might want to stay there in 5 years. You can mention wanting to go to grad school. Typically, employers are pro-grad school, especially because grad school classes are typically at night. So if that's outside work hours, then typically employers are completely fine with that. And it shows that you're ambitious. So you can definitely mention that you wanted to go to grad school. Yes, we have a question.
We have a lot of questions. Can we take a little short?
Yeah, we're going to take well, you know what? Let me just go through. Let me do one more because I'm on the last impressive answers to questions.
Okay.
And then right after that, I'm going to answer your questions.
Okay.
Because then we're at a good break point. So just going to go through this real quick because you might have questions about questions. So at the end,
I do.
So let's get them. I'm sure you do. So let's get them all in. So at the end of an interview, almost always they're going to say, "Do you have any questions for us?" You should always have questions. And sometimes interviews are very detail oriented. They might have answered a lot of your questions during this course of the interview. Regardless, you should still have more questions. So you should at least have 3 to 5 questions prepared, but maybe only ask 3 because some of them might have already been answered through the course of the interview and just your conversation with them. If you say, no, I don't have any questions, I'm cool, that implies that you're really not interested in learning more, another red flag for an interviewer. The things we really want to know about, unfortunately, are the things we should never ask about unless you are in the position where you're actually offered the job. So unfortunately, in this game of interviewing, At the point where you're not offered the job yet, unfortunately, I know you want to know this, but you're not supposed to ask about benefits, time off, salary, or anything that can be construed as selfish. Sure, these are all things that draw us to jobs, but if they think that that's what's forefront on your mind and it's not you alleviating their workload, they're not going to be impressed with you. So even though we really want to know these things, make sure that you don't ask them until you're actually offered the job and you're in the driver's seat at that point, and you can ask those things at that point. Ask questions that show you want to be a valuable part of the team. So some good questions are, what do you enjoy most about working here? What would a successful candidate look like to you? What's a typical day like in this position? Do you offer any professional training or development in this position? What new products, services, or future growth do you see for this company? And you are allowed to ask what the history of the position is. How did this position come to be? Because, of course, they're interviewing you, but still you are interviewing them as well, in a way. And if it looks like they might offer you the job, you probably were wondering, well, why did this position open up? Was someone unhappy? Is it a high turnover position, or perhaps is it a new position? So you can kind of get a sense, and you are allowed to ask what's the history of this position. It's a perfectly normal question to ask, and it's understandable why you would want to ask it. So at this point, I'm going to answer some of your questions because apparently you have a lot.
A lot of questions.
I hope you don't stump me, but let's see what you ask.
Stump Deborah. Okay, I'm going to break them down.
Okay, here we go.
The first one is going to be about questions asked, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then we have some dressing questions, and then we have a few very concrete. Okay,
dressing.
The first one is, what do you want to do?
Go ahead.
I'll do the dressing first. The first one, someone said Kohl's. Don't forget Kohl's. That's another good place.
Thank you. Kohl's is very good. Yes.
Okay.
They don't have a lot of petite. I'm a little petite. So.
Okay, that's just a statement.
I agree, though. I agree about Kohl's. Good job.
There you go.
Good coupons.
This person said, in hot weather,
yes.
What can you wear to an interview to avoid sweat, like visible sweat stains? Like, what would you suggest when it's hot?
Unfortunately, I have to tell you that in hot weather, you still have to wear a suit. Okay, so this is what you need to do when you walk over. Say you have an interview in the city and it's hot, and I get it, and you're sweating. I understand. Like today, for example, why don't you have the jacket? Just carry the jacket with you, and then when you get to the interview, you got to wear the jacket. You have to wear a suit. When you go to a wedding in hot weather, you're a groomsman or bridesmaid or whatever. Groomsmen will have to wear jackets. Treat it like that. You have to. There's really not an option there. Hopefully where you go to interview is going to be air conditioned, but on the way in, yeah, go ahead and carry the jacket, over your shoulder or something, and then throw it on when you get into the interview. Of course, you can wear a shirt that's lighter underneath, a lighter material, for instance, something short sleeve, something sleeveless if you're a woman.
Someone here says use armpit pads.
You guys are very knowledgeable. So apparently there's something called armpit pads that I've never heard of.
Okay.
But great, yeah. If you could find those somewhere. Kohl's maybe.
Okay, there you go. Okay, is leather ever appropriate for work?
No.
I guess, okay.
Leather's never appropriate, unless you're talking about shoes and purses.
No. Right.
If you're talking about leather jackets, no, that's not going to be appropriate. It depends on, if you're interviewing to be a rock star, perhaps.
Or like a tattoo artist.
Or tattoo artist, or like they said in the video, I do have to say some very artistic positions may have a different dress code. So a lot of this is going to apply. This applies a lot more to those going into business, nonprofit organizations, teaching. In art and music, things are a little different.
Okay. Here's more. There's so many coming in questions.
Oh, I love it.
Can you bring questions with you on note cards to an interview? Like your questions.
Right.
They're gonna,
yeah. What I would do, not necessarily, I wouldn't bring them on note cards. So you should always have a portfolio or some kind of binder, which actually I didn't mention earlier, that has copies of your resume in it, and it has an area where you're going to collect business cards from everyone that you come in contact with. Those usually typically have notebooks in them, or they fit a notebook. It's the size of a piece of paper. So write it on there, not on note cards. So make sure that it's on like a full paper and pad, and then even bring a pen and show you're really interested in the answer and write down those answers. So you can get those kind of portfolios and binders and things like that. You can get them even at the William Patterson bookstore if you want the William Patterson emblem on them, or you can get them at Staples or Office Max or something like that. And actually, that's really part of how you're dressing for an interview. You should never bring your resume and all that in like a manila folder or anything.
Okay, this person asked, what are some questions I should ask for a teacher? But I think you already said that, like you should say, what is your
a lot of it,
curriculum planning like, what is like those kind of things, right?
A lot of this, yeah, I would probably, I mean, you should probably know what they use for their teaching methods in the school, because that hopefully will be on the school website. Some good teaching questions off the top of my head are, what opportunities are there to be a leader of clubs or something, like after school programs? What kind of opportunities are there for me to be involved in cultural workshops, for example, which I know goes on in the district where my kids go to school. So things like that. How can I kind of expand? Even with teaching, you can ask about professional development. Teachers typically go to the NJEA convention in November, something like that.
Okay, so many more.
Okay.
What should be in a portfolio for a teacher?
In a portfolio for a teacher, you guys are gonna, well, no, they're all alumni, right? In your student teaching seminar, think back to your student teaching seminar, because I think they went through portfolio development. And by the way, you can go back to the Career Development Center at any point as an alumni, and they have career counselors specifically for education. But I could tell you that some examples of your lesson plans should be in there. Letters of recommendation, and this goes for more than just teachers. If you can gather letters of recommendation, generic ones. So don't have, if you're going to ask a former professor or a former supervisor to write you a letter of recommendation, which is a nice idea to do before you start to go on interviews, have copies of those in your whatever binder or portfolio that you bring. Have copies of them and even offer to distribute them at the interview. Don't make the mistake I made when I was 22 and I asked someone to write me a letter of recommendation for a very specific job, and then I couldn't use it for more than just that one interview. So make sure it's more generic and it's not written specifically to one employer, so that means you can use it over and over again.
Okay, I'm going to say a few things. One, someone wants to know if we'll be doing the webinar again soon. This one, we don't know, but we will. We are recording it, so it'll be on our YouTube channel, and we will send you a PDF of it. So that's question number one.
Okay.
Question number two is not a question. The leather in question was a dress with a leather panel in it, and I know exactly what she's talking about.
I know. I feel like I know what she's talking about as well.
Could that be appropriate?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say if we're ever in doubt, then I would still not go for it. You know, I would invest in another piece that doesn't have it, because, well, if I was interviewing you, I wouldn't be offended by that. I would think it's kind of cool, actually. But you never know who's going to interview you and what they think. So always err on the side of conservative, because you don't want to ever, if you don't get that job, you don't want to be obsessing over, was it the leather panel in my dress that didn't get me the job? You don't want to start obsessing over it and worrying about it. Why not just wear something that you know is okay by anyone's standards, and then you're going to be fine. If the leather panel could be hidden by perhaps a suit jacket, then that's something. You could do that. Or if it's like a leather panel that looks like a belt, like I'm trying to envision what it looks like at the slit. There's like triangle ones. I know there's ones that look like belts. If it looks like a belt, I think that would be okay. Yeah, I think that style is okay. But
there's so many more questions.
Yeah, we can ask. Yeah, let's answer some more questions.
Wanted to see a slide, but I'm just going to say that we will send you a PDF of this, so you'll see all the slides. Where instead of Deborah going backwards.
Okay.
Okay. Here are some pretty intense ones.
Oh.
Not intense, but can you ask when they say, "Do you have any questions for us?"
Yeah.
Can you ask the company, how do you stand out from your competition? Can you? Or is that an appropriate question to ask, or is it kind of like, is it cocky?
I don't think it's a cocky question. I would say, what distinguishes you from another company in this field? What would you say distinguishes your company from another one in this field?
Okay.
I think that would be an appropriate question.
Okay.
You might stump them.
That'd be good.
Hopefully they'll know the answer, though.
Yeah. Okay. If they ask you, can they contact your current employer? What's an appropriate response to that?
Well, hopefully you'll say yes. But if you're uncomfortable because you don't want your current employer to know that you're going on interviews, which is understandable, you can say that. And you know what? That actually doesn't make you look bad, because then they know that you're a valuable member of that work team where you currently are. So if you're a little hesitant about that, then perhaps you could even say, if I'm being really seriously considered, okay, but if they're not, they should be on your reference list or not. If they're not on your reference list, probably they shouldn't ask to contact them. But they understand that you're leaving a position to go towards them, and that typically no one would want to tell their employer that they're leaving unless they actually have a job offer. So it's understandable, and they're human too. They've been on interviews as well. Always know that your interviewers have also done interviews. So it's another way to ease your anxiety, to just know that fact.
Okay, I got to just say, there's a lot of questions coming. We're going to try to get to as many as we can because I don't have much, but let me just do these two.
Yeah, I can condense some of what I'm doing.
Okay.
No problem. I think questions are important.
This person
Yeah.
said they were stumped. They actually got stumped. In an interview, someone said, describe yourself in 3 words, and they literally choked.
Yeah.
What are they really looking for when they ask you that?
Well, they're looking to see if you're a good match for the job. So if you describe yourself in 3 words, that's actually not such an uncommon question. So it's something you can expect and get ready for. And remember, your nonverbal responses are going to carry a lot more weight than what you actually say. So if you appeared approachable and you had all the good nonverbal behaviors to go along with that response, if you felt like you didn't answer it well, don't obsess over it because it won't necessarily be as much of a red flag to them as you feel it would be. However, of course, 3 of your strengths, you want to be, in 3 words, you want to be a little more specific than general. So instead of saying people person, say something that's a little bit more specific. But have those, they should probably be three verbs from your, or 3 adjectives, I mean, there's my English, 3 adjectives from your strengths answer that you can use in that answer.
Okay.
And just have it prepared ahead of time.
Okay. Can you bring an iPad with you if it's in your portfolio with your resume and everything like that?
I would have it printed on resume paper.
But I mean, like, does it look inappropriate to have your iPad with you if you want to show them something? Or
if you're in graphic design or something that's computer related, I can see having your iPad on you, but everything else should be really printed. There's a lot of people who really like to see paper still. And by the way, and I know a lot of times you're emailing resumes now, all your resumes should be printed on resume paper, which you can get, again, at Staples Office Max. It's like a thicker quality paper.
I think you mentioned this before, but can you say you know someone personally at the company, or is that tacky when they ask you?
You can say that.
Okay.
You can say that. This actually should be a positive thing. Hopefully that person's already contacted the people interviewing you and prep them like, hey, I know that person, they're advocating for you. But they might already know that because if you do know someone and they're well respected and that's the key, well respected at the company, hopefully you've actually already included that in the cover letter that you sent to get the job interview. Like the first sentence of the cover letter, one of the first sentences, the first paragraph should include that you actually know that person and they referred you to the job.
It's funny, this person just wrote that her mother-in-law, I think, is a vice president at the company she's interviewing. Her husband says, don't mention it. Her mother-in-law says, mention it, even though she's in like a different state and a different building and all that other stuff. Should she mention that?
If she's in a different state, in a different building, and she doesn't have any contact with the people, I might not mention that. But I think it would be your mother-in-law should be proactive in getting in touch with people.
She works in a different state in a different department.
Well, if it's your mother, if you have the same last name, they'll probably figure out that's your mother-in-law. And I don't know if this is a male asking this, and if this is a female.
It's a female.
Okay, yeah. So you could potentially have the same last name, and then they'll probably put 2 and 2 together.
And someone wanted to know about resume paper on regular printers, and yes, it can be used on every printer.
It can be used on any printer. It shouldn't be on regular paper. Believe it or not, there's a lot of old fogies out there interviewing you like myself. And I only graduated college in 2000, and we were still sending paper resumes in 2000. So most of the people still really feel that resumes should be on resume paper. And I'm in my 30s, and I feel that way.
This is the last one I'm going to ask.
Okay.
Continue. What if they ask your salary requirements? Okay. I
know
it's a big one because this person
Good
said
question.
they were asked, and then they kept pressing them, and they didn't want to say anything. You don't want to price yourself out of the range or whatever. So what do you do if they're pressing you?
You could say, if it is negotiable, start out the sentence with, this is negotiable, but upon doing research, and that's the key, upon doing research of similar positions, I found that the typical salary range tends to be between, and give maybe a $5,000 span, and that you would be comfortable with that kind of a salary, but you want to learn more about the position first. So where you can, you want to throw that question back at them. But if they really press you and they're not going to take those dancing around it for an answer, then you definitely should say, upon my research. And that's another thing you need to do ahead of time. Like I said, salary.com, there's a lot of other websites. Do your research ahead of time. Make sure that you have that prepared and you know what salary you're expecting. If it's something that's a public school teacher or something like that, the salary is probably pretty set in stone for some positions, so there might not be a lot of negotiation there. Understand that. But in a private company, it could be very different.
Okay, I'm not going to ask
Okay.
anymore because it's almost 1 o'clock.
And I have the question from one of our. I have a question
that's right.
that was asked prior, and I'm gonna answer that at the end. There was one question that was typed in prior to me starting this. Okay. So a very quick role play.
Oh, this is perfect because someone said, how do I role play with someone who doesn't know my location? This is perfect.
Okay, so this is, for example, an answer you might have to some of these questions, just to kind of show you, just to play it out.
Tell us about yourself.
I'd be happy to. I'll be graduating in May with a bachelor's degree in management and a professional sales minor from William Patterson University. I feel the combination of my coursework in management coupled with the skills I have learned from my sales minor will help me to lead and work with others, as well as provide excellent customer service. I've worked to broaden my leadership skills beyond the classroom by being the SGA treasurer and coordinating philanthropic events on campus through my sorority. Finally, I was an intern at Enterprise last summer, and my supervisor recognized me for excellence in customer service, reliability, and ability to work well with others. And I just want to pause here and say that that sounded really rehearsed, and this is also a fine line, and this is a mistake I've even made in interviews. Yes, you want to rehearse and practice ahead of time, but there's a fine art to not sounding rehearsed, so you want to sound natural, but again, know what you're going to say in advance.
Should we do this whole thing? We have like 3 minutes.
Okay, we have 3 minutes. We'll skip the next one, as I want to make sure I point this out. Interview aftermath, you want to make sure that you send a thank you email or card within 24 hours of the interview. I should take out the card line. It should really just be an email, and it should be every single person that you connected with in the interview. Hopefully you've gotten all their business cards and you've put them in the portfolio that you brought, and you email them thanking them, and even bringing up something that you learned in an interview and how you hope to hear from them soon. Make sure that, especially if in a process where you think there'll be more interviews, to reflect in a journal, because you might be going on a lot. In 2 weeks, you might have gone on vacation. Talked about, and write it down, write everything that you remembered down, what they talked about, what your answers were, to make sure that if there's another interview that you sound really well, even better prepared for that. Allow time to pass at least 2 weeks before inquiring about the status. This is the unfortunate thing. I do want to tell you, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Companies do not have to send a letter saying that they have not selected you. They don't even have to send a thank you letter to you for the interview.
Perfect.
They don't have to tell you. It's very unfortunate, and it's just not good manners on the part of companies that they don't do this, but just keep applying to jobs until you receive and accept an offer. Unfortunately, an interview could seem to go really well, but maybe they have an internal candidate that they know they wanted, or maybe they didn't have the money to fund the position. So no matter how it went, just keep applying and don't put all your eggs in one basket. And unfortunately, sometimes you'll just never hear a response, even though it seemed to go really well. And I'm really sorry to have to end it on that note. One more thing, I've got to tell you, your online presence is absolutely 100% public. Whether you're interviewing, whether you're in a job, all the employers now, all of them, 4 years ago, Rappler 2011 did a study. That was 4 years ago. Now, I would say that this probably went up at least 5 percentage points. 4 years ago, 91% of employers use social media to screen potential job candidates. 76%, 5 years ago again, or 4 years ago, I keep doing my math wrong, will view your Facebook account despite your privacy settings. When you have 1,000 friends on Facebook, they have 1,000 friends, they have 1,000 friends. Word gets around about you. 53% will use your Twitter account and also posts are archived. 48% will view your LinkedIn account. You should definitely use LinkedIn. This is professional networking, so if you don't already have a LinkedIn account, you should have one, and this is where you can really look positive. You can put your picture on it, all your resume information, even have references writing in about you on LinkedIn. It's a very, very good way to look for a job, and definitely check it out. Finally, 69% of employers 4 years ago have rejected candidates based on what is viewed. I can only guarantee that the number has since increased. There's your drum roll, do's and don'ts of interviewing in 2 minutes. So real quick, dress the part, give examples. Number 8, be professional with everyone. Everybody, from the receptionist to the president, be professional. Number 7, ask well thought out questions at the end. Number 6, keep your answers brief but thorough. Number 5, address everyone by Mr., Miss, Doctor, unless requested to do otherwise. Keep it formal. Err on the side of formal, even if they seem informal. Attempt to be the best natural, approachable version of yourself, just like I've said all along. Send a thank you within 24 hours to every single person you met, including the receptionist. Show enthusiasm. Be excited about this potential job. Research, research, research is my #1 do. My top 10 don'ts: don't ever, ever arrive late. Automatic red flag. Definitely you won't get the job if you arrive late. Don't bring drinks or food into the interview. Seems to go without saying, but some people have done it. Don't ever look at your watch or your cell phone. Don't speak to the interviewer like you would a friend, even if they seem informal. Err on the side of formal. Don't say anything about yourself that's negative or about anyone else. Don't either appear desperate or overconfident. Try to find that middle ground. Don't answer questions with just yes or no. Make sure you give examples. Don't have a fear that you're going to be viewed as bragging. A lot of people have trouble overcoming this fear. They feel like if they're talking positively about themselves, they look like they're bragging. This is where you get a free pass on bragging. In an interview setting, you're supposed to look very confident about yourself. It's okay. Do not discuss time off, salary, or benefits until you're absolutely 100% forced to. And don't ever lie. Okay, so that's me, Deborah Sheffield. And I had one question from prior. I don't want to neglect this question.
Oh, yes, please do.
There was a question from beforehand. This person asked, for someone who has a large gap, several years in their employment history, what should they do? What advice do I have? Should one try to give a brief answer or provide a detailed response? So when there's a large gap in your employment, I don't have a lot of details in this case, but it could happen for many reasons. You should probably be honest. Most of the time it's a forgivable gap. Forgivable gaps include going to grad school full-time. If there were company-wide layoffs, completely understandable. And if you took time off to raise children, childcare, something like that, that really isn't something that's understandable. Even a long job search is understandable in an economy such as this. If it was something negative, if you couldn't get employment, if you were let go for some kind of a negative reason like a bad fit, then you should keep it very brief if you left the last job or something like that. Either way, there's really no need for a very long explanation. And remember, we're all human. Even those interviewing you could potentially have, at one point in their lives, have a long employment gap. Is there something else?
You know what? I'm just going to say thank you to Deborah because it's after 1. And thank you all for staying. You all stayed. And if there's any questions that you typed in, I think I got mostly everybody. We will send out the answers to those questions as soon as we compile them. We'll also send you a PDF of this so you'll have all the slides. Some people ask, can you go back to certain slides? You'll have them all in your hands probably by the end of the day. And other than that, it will be up on our YouTube channel once we convert the recording. And that's it. So Deborah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for attending and for staying, all 63 of you.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, and we will see you soon. Thank you, Deborah.
Thanks. Have a great summer.
Bye, everyone.